The massive space station called Harmony's Edge floated silently in the void between two angry empires. Its gleaming white hull stretched for kilometers, dotted with docking bays that welcomed ships from across the galaxy. Inside its corridors, beings from dozens of different worlds walked together in peace. This was humanity's greatest achievement, they all believed. A place where war became words, where enemies became friends. Ambassador Kiwoo Park stood at the observation deck, watching. Another Vec warship dock at the station. The alien vessel looked like a giant metal scorpion, all sharp angles and weapon ports. Behind it came a sleek Thalan cruiser, smooth as water, and twice as deadly. Both ships carried diplomats who would rather be carrying guns. Kiwoo had been doing this job for 30 years. He was good at it, everyone said so. The Vec called him the Patient One in their harsh language. The Thalans had given him an honorary title that meant Bridge Builder. Other alien races sent their children to study his methods at human universities. But today something felt different. Ambassador? The voice belonged to So-Min Lee, his newest assistant. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes worried Kiwoo sometimes. They saw too much. Yes, So-Min. The files you asked me to review. The historical ones, I found something strange. Kiwoo turned from the window. So-Min held a datapad in her hands, but her fingers shook slightly. In the 3 months she had worked for him, he had never seen her nervous. Strange how? So-Min touched the datapad's surface, and holographic images appeared in the air between them. Star maps, battle formations, lists of names. I was looking at the Corvex War from 200 years ago, the one where humans helped negotiate peace. I remember reading about it, a great victory for diplomacy. Yes, sir. But look at this. The hologram changed, showing a timeline. The peace treaty was signed on March 15, 2356. But in the 6 months after that, something interesting happened. More names appeared in the air. Kiwoo recognized some of them from history books. General Thexkar, who had led the Corvex assault, fleets. Admiral Ventala, who had burned 3 human colonies. War Chief Moradun, who had sworn to exterminate humanity. They all died, So-Min said quietly. Every major Corvex war leader who opposed the peace treaty. General Thexkar had a heart attack. Admiral Ventala's ship exploded in what looked like an engine failure. War Chief Moradun fell down some stairs. Kiwoo said nothing. He watched the names float in the hologram like ghosts. At first I thought it was just coincidence. Bad luck. But then I checked the Cylonian conflict from 2398. More names appeared, more death dates. Same pattern. Peace treaty signed, war leaders dead within months. The Drakmari incident in 2431. The Zinthari border dispute in 2467. Every single time, Ambassador. So-Min's voice got quieter with each word. In 300 years of human peacekeeping, over 2,000 alien military leaders have died of natural causes or accidents within a year of signing peace treaties with us. The mathematical probability of this being coincidence is less than 1 in a billion. The hologram showed a galaxy-wide map now, dotted with thousands of red markers. Each one represented a dead alien who had once threatened galactic peace. The pattern was undeniable. Kiwoo looked at the young woman for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the same warm, friendly smile that had charmed diplomats from 100 different worlds. So-Min, you've done excellent work, very thorough. Thank you, sir, but what does it mean, are we? It means you're ready for a new assignment. Kiwoo touched his own datapad. I'm transferring you to the current crisis. The Vec-Thalan situation needs fresh eyes. So-Min blinked. Sir, I don't understand. What about the pattern? What about the deaths? What about them? Kiwoo's smile never wavered. Coincidences happen, So-Min. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Military leaders make enemies. Sometimes those enemies get lucky. But his eyes were not smiling. They were cold and calculating like a predator watching prey. So-Min stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. Of course, sir. Coincidences. After she left, Kiwoo, returned to the observation window. The Vec and Thalan ships sat in their docking bays like sleeping dragons. Soon, their diplomats would meet in Conference Room 7. They would argue and threaten and pound tables with fists and tentacles. They would demand things they could not have and refuse things they needed to accept. And Kiwu would sit there, patient and smiling, taking notes. His personal communicator buzzed softly. The message was from Admiral Jung-Ki Nam of the Terran Fleet. Merchant vessels are moving into position. Cargo manifests have been updated. Kiwu deleted the message and smiled again. To anyone watching, it would look like he had received news about a shipment of trade goods. The galaxy saw what it expected to see. 3 hours later, the conference room buzzed with tension. The Vec delegation sat on one side of the long table, their gray skin marked with ritual scars that showed their military ranks. Across from them, the Thalans perched on specially designed chairs, their forearms gesturing constantly as they spoke in their musical language. General Dalho Shin led the Vec delegation. He was old for his species, maybe 90 standard years, but his eyes burned with the fire of a young warrior. Scars covered his face and neck, each one a story of battle survived. The humans had been watching him for 3 years. "The Thalans have invaded our territory," General Dalho said, his voice like grinding metal. "They have built stations in the Kepler Drift. This is an act of war." Across the table, Commander Taemin's song of the Thalans made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. When the translation came through the speakers, his words were just as harsh. "The drift belongs to no one. We have as much right to build there as anyone. The Vec grow weak and seek excuses for their failures." Both sides started talking at once. Voices rose. Translation software struggled to keep up. A Thalan diplomat threw what looked like a crystal paperweight at a Vec officer's head. Kiwu sat at the head of the table, hands folded, watching everything with calm interest. He had seen this dance 1,000 times before. Eventually, both sides would exhaust themselves with shouting and turn to him for solutions. "Gentlemen," he said finally, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife through silk. "Ladies, please." The room fell silent. It always did. There was something about Kiwu's voice that made people want to listen. "I understand your concerns," he continued. "Both sides have valid points. The Kepler Drift has been unclaimed space for centuries, but General Dalho is right that building military stations there could be seen as aggressive. And Commander Taemin is right that space belongs to everyone." General Dalho snorted. "Pretty words from humans who have never fought a real war." Kiwu's smile never flickered. "Perhaps that's why we're useful as mediators. Sometimes an outside perspective helps." "You've been mediating for 300 years, Commander Taemin said, his tone slightly mocking. "Yet conflicts still arise. Perhaps your methods are not as effective as you claim." "Perhaps," Kiwu agreed. "But here we are talking instead of shooting. That has to count for something." The negotiations continued for 6 more hours. Maps were displayed. Territory was discussed. Trade routes were analyzed. Both sides made demands they knew were impossible and offered concessions they didn't mean. Kiwu took notes on everything: ship positions, military strengths, personal habits of the commanders, who drank coffee and who preferred tea, who stayed up late and who rose early, which delegates had medical conditions, which ones had families. All useful information, though, not for the reasons anyone suspected. During a break, Kiwu stepped into a private communication booth. The call he made was encrypted through 17 different channels and bounced off relay stations in 4 different star systems. Director Han speaking. "Yansu, it's Kiwu. How are the grandchildren?" "Growing fast. Little Jine lost another tooth yesterday." Yansu Han had run Terran intelligence for 15 years. She was one of only 12 people in the galaxy who knew what humans really did during peacekeeping missions. "I assume this isn't a social call." The Vec-Thalan situation is escalating. Both sides are positioning fleet assets. Intelligence suggests they're planning for full military engagement within the month. Deployment packages? I'm sending you the complete files. Priority targets, security assessments, operational windows, the usual. Understood. Assets are already in position. Just give us the word. Not yet. Let's see if real diplomacy works first. Yan Su laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ki Wu, in 30 years, has real diplomacy ever worked? No. But we have to try. That's what makes us the good guys. After the call, Ki Wu returned to the conference room. The negotiations continued until well past midnight. No progress was made. Both sides left angrier than when they arrived. General Dal Ho stopped at the door. Ambassador Park, your patience is admirable, but patience will not stop a war. Perhaps not, General, but impatience will certainly start one. Sometimes war is necessary. Ki Wu nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes it is. The question is always who decides when that time has come. After everyone left, Ki Wu walked through the empty corridors of Harmony's Edge. The station never truly slept, but during the night shift it became quieter, more peaceful. He passed a group of Zenthari traders sharing drinks in a cantina. Tiny. Unji Choi stepped off the transport ship onto Vec Prime, the homeworld of the most warlike species in the galaxy. The air tasted of metal and smoke, thick with the exhaust from countless factories that churned out weapons day and night. Above her, the sky glowed red from the 3 suns that burned overhead, casting everything in the color of blood. She looked exactly like what she claimed to be, a young academic from Earth University, here to study Vec warrior culture for her dissertation. Her clothes were simple and practical. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She carried a bag full of recording equipment and research notes. She even wore glasses, though her eyesight was perfect. The Vec immigration officer who processed her entry documents barely looked at her. Humans were common visitors to Vec Prime. They came to study, to trade, to learn about the great warrior traditions. The Vec enjoyed having an audience for their culture of strength and honor. What they didn't know was that Unji had memorized every detail of the spaceport security system during her 10-minute walk from the ship to the immigration desk. She had counted the guards, noted their weapons, identified 3 different escape routes, and spotted 2 security cameras that had blind spots large enough for a person to slip through unnoticed. She had been trained for this since she was 6 years old. The Shadow Corps didn't officially exist. According to every government database, it was a myth created by conspiracy theorists and paranoid aliens. The Terran Federation had many military branches: the Fleet, the Marines, the Colonial Defense Force. But nowhere in any official document would you find mention of the organization that trained children to become perfect killers, then sent them out into the galaxy, disguised as teachers and merchants and diplomats. Yunji had been recruited after scoring impossibly high on pattern recognition tests at her elementary school. The recruiters told her parents she had been selected for an advanced education program. In a way, that was true. She had learned mathematics and literature and science just like any other child. She had also learned 17 different ways to kill a person with her bare hands. Now at 28, she was one of the best operatives the Corps had ever produced. She spoke 14 languages fluently. She could pick any lock ever invented. She could disappear into a crowd or stand out just enough to be memorable, depending on what the mission required. Most importantly, she could become anyone she needed to be. Today, she needed to be Dr. Yoonji Choi, cultural anthropologist. The taxi that took her into the city was driven by a young Vec male, whose scales still showed the bright green of youth. He was chatty, proud of his world and eager to share its wonders with a visitor. "First time on Vec Prime?" he asked, his English heavily accented but clear. "Yes, it's amazing. So different from Earth. You study warriors, yes? My uncle is General Dalho Shin, very famous general. Perhaps you interview him?" Yunji felt her pulse quicken, but her expression remained politely interested. "That would be wonderful. Is he very busy with military duties?" "Always busy, but he likes talking about old battles. I give you his assistant's contact information." By the time they reached her hotel, Yunji had learned that General Dalho lived in the military district, that he suffered from chronic back pain from an old war injury, that he took a medicinal tea every morning at exactly 0600 hours, and that his nephew thought the universe of his famous uncle. She had also learned that the nephew, whose name was Johan, worked at the central communications hub that handled all military transmissions on the planet. Within an hour of arriving on Vec Prime, Yunji had identified 2 potential access points to her primary target. She hadn't even unpacked her bags yet. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Hyunwoo Kim was attending a trade conference on Thalan Prime. The planet was the opposite of Vec Prime in every way. Where the Vec world was harsh and industrial, Thalan Prime was covered in crystal cities that sang in harmony with the wind. The air was clean and sweet, filled with the music of wind chimes that the Thalans used for both decoration and communication. Hyunwoo looked like a successful businessman from one of Earth's trading corporations. His suit was expensive but not flashy. His smile was warm but professional. His business cards identified him as a specialist in rare mineral exports, exactly the kind of person the Thalans loved to meet. The Thalans were traders by nature. They valued commerce almost as much as they valued war. A human who could offer them profitable deals was always welcome at their conferences. What they didn't know was that Hyunwoo had never sold a single mineral in his life. His real expertise was in reading people, in finding their weaknesses, in discovering the small details that could be turned into weapons. He had already identified Commander Taemin's song at the opening reception. The Thalan military leader was easy to spot. He was the only person at a trade conference wearing a uniform instead of business clothes. He stood near the buffet table, sampling different foods with the careful attention of someone who took pleasure in new experiences. Hyunwoo made a mental note. The commander was a gourmand. Food would be the access point. "Excuse me," Hyunwoo said, approaching with a plate of appetizers. "I'm new to Thalan cuisine. Could you recommend something?" Commander Taemin's 4 eyes lit up with pleasure. Like many military officers, he enjoyed being treated as an expert, even on non-military subjects. "Ah, a human with good taste. Try the Veltar crystals. They're grown only on our southern continent. And the blue paste there, that's made from deep-sea organisms. Very rare, very expensive." For the next 20 minutes, they discussed food. Hyunwoo asked intelligent questions and made appreciative comments about each dish he tried. He learned that Commander Taemin had a personal chef, that he imported delicacies from 12 different worlds, and that he hosted dinner parties every week for his senior staff. He also learned that the commander had a severe allergy to a common preservative used in processed foods. Not deadly, but enough to cause uncomfortable digestive problems, the kind of thing that might force someone to seek medical attention if they consumed too much of it. Medical attention that could be provided by the right kind of doctor, who might have access to much more dangerous substances. Back at the hotel that night, both operatives filed their reports through encrypted channels that bounced through relay stations across 3 star systems before reaching their destination. A small office on Earth that officially belonged to the Department of Agricultural Statistics. Director Yeon Soo-han read both reports while drinking her morning coffee. Yoonji had already made contact with a nephew of the primary target and identified multiple access vectors. Hyunwoo had established the target's primary weakness and begun developing an approach strategy. Both operatives were performing exactly as expected. In 15 years of running human intelligence operations, Yeon-soo had never seen any other species match the patience and thoroughness of her agents. Other races trained spies to gather information quickly and escape. Humans trained their operatives to become part of the societies they infiltrated, to build relationships that could last for years before being activated. It was a longer process, but it was also completely undetectable. Her secure communicator chimed softly. The call was from Ambassador Kiwoo Park. "Any word from our cultural attachés?" "Both are establishing their covers as planned. Full integration should be complete within the week." "Good. The negotiations aren't going well. Both sides are more aggressive than usual. I think General Dalho is under pressure from his government to take decisive action. And Commander Taemin?" "The same. The Thalan military wants to prove their strength after the humiliation at Kepler Station last month." Yeon-soo nodded, though Kiwoo couldn't see her through the audio connection. "The assets are in place if needed, but I hope you can find a peaceful solution." "So do I. But hope isn't a strategy." After the call ended, Yeon-soo pulled up the personnel files for both operatives. Yoon-ji Choi, recruited at age 6, graduated, From advanced training at 21, 7 successful missions with 0 compromises. Hyunwoo Kim, recruited at age 7, graduated at 22, 12 successful missions with perfect operational security maintained. Both were excellent at their jobs. Both were also completely expendable if the situation required it. That was the hardest part of running the Shadow Corps. The operatives weren't just tools. They were human beings with hopes and dreams and families back on Earth. But when galactic peace was at stake, personal considerations became secondary. Yeon-soo had made that choice 15 years ago when she took the job. She would make it again if necessary. Over the next week, both operatives deepened their infiltration of their respective targets. Yoonji became a regular visitor to the VEC military archives, researching historical battles with an enthusiasm that impressed even the warrior-obsessed VEC scholars. She interviewed retired generals about famous campaigns. She attended ceremonial competitions where young warriors proved their worth in ritual combat, and she learned everything there was to know about General Dalho Shin. The general had been born on a mining colony that was attacked by raiders when he was 12 years old. He had hidden in a supply closet for 6 hours while pirates killed his family and neighbors. That experience had shaped him into the fierce warrior he became, but the third week of negotiations began with the worst insult Kiwoo Park had ever received in 30 years of diplomatic service. General Dalho Shin stood at the head of the conference table, his gray scales flushed dark with anger. Behind him, the other VEC delegates muttered and growled in their harsh language. Across the room, the Thalan delegation watched with barely concealed amusement, their 4 arms crossed in gestures of superiority. "Enough!" General Dalho roared, his fist crashing down on the polished table hard enough to crack the surface. 3 weeks we have wasted here, listening to human words that mean nothing. 3 weeks of delays while our enemies build their strength. Kiwoo kept his expression calm and neutral. "General, I understand your frustration, but progress takes time. We've already agreed on several key points." "Key points?" The general's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. "We have agreed on nothing that matters. The Thalans still occupy our territory. They still threaten our shipping lanes, and you still speak of patience and compromise." Commander Taemin's song rose from his chair, his musical voice carrying easily across the room. "Perhaps the general is simply afraid to face us in honest battle. Perhaps it is easier to blame human mediators than to admit VEC weakness." The VEC delegation exploded into angry shouts. 3 of them reached for weapons that weren't there. Harmony's Edge had strict rules about bringing arms to diplomatic meetings. The Thalans responded with their own chorus of insults and challenges. Kiwoo stood slowly, raising his hands for silence. The room gradually quieted, but the tension remained thick enough to cut with a knife. "Gentlemen, please. We're here to find solutions, not to exchange insults." General Dalho turned his burning gaze on Kiwoo. When he spoke, his voice was low and deadly serious. "Solutions? What solutions have humans ever provided except empty words and false hope? You speak of peace while knowing nothing of war. You offer compromise while understanding nothing of honor." He stepped closer to Kiwoo, close enough that the ambassador could smell the metallic scent of the general's breath. "Humans are pathetic pacifists who have never known real conflict. You hide behind diplomacy because you lack the courage to fight. You are weak. Your species is weak. And your weakness makes you useless as mediators." The room fell completely silent. Even the soft hum of the life support system seemed to pause. Every being in the chamber stared at Kiwoo, waiting to see how he would respond to such a devastating public humiliation. Kiwoo looked at General Dalho for a long moment. His expression remained perfectly calm, almost serene. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and polite. "Thank you for your candid feedback, General. I appreciate your honesty about your concerns regarding human capabilities." The general blinked, clearly expecting a different response. "Perhaps," Kiwoo continued, "we should adjourn for today. Give everyone time to consider their positions more carefully." Commander Taemin made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Yes, let the humans run away to consider their hurt feelings. Very typical." Kiwu turned to the Thalan commander with the same peaceful smile. Of course, Commander. We'll resume tomorrow morning at the usual time. I hope everyone has a pleasant evening. The delegates filed out of the conference room in groups, the Vec muttering about human cowardice, the Thalans chirping with amusement. Kiwu remained behind, gathering his notes with unhurried efficiency. Only So-Min Lee stayed with him. She looked confused and concerned. Ambassador, are you all right? What the general said? What about it? It was incredibly insulting. Shouldn't we file a protest? Contact their government? Kiwu finished packing his files and looked at his young assistant. So-Min, in diplomacy, sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. But his eyes weren't diplomatic. They were cold and calculating and completely devoid of mercy. That night, Kiwu made 3 phone calls from his private quarters. The first was to Director Yansu Han on Earth. The situation has deteriorated beyond recovery, he said simply. Both military commanders have made their positions clear. They want war, not peace. Are you requesting authorization? I am. Authorization granted. Time frame? Immediate. Both targets, maximum efficiency, minimal exposure. Understood. Our people are standing by. The second call was to Admiral Jung-Ki Nam aboard the command ship Silent Promise, which was currently disguised as a luxury passenger liner in the Centauri shipping lanes. Admiral, we're moving to Phase 3. Copy that. All assets are in position. Estimated completion time is 72 hours. Make sure it looks natural. The galaxy is watching this situation closely. When has it ever looked like anything else? The third call was encrypted through so many channels that it took almost a minute to establish connection. When the voice answered, it could have been male or female, human or alien. The digital scramblers made it impossible to tell. Control, speaking. This is Ambassador Park, authorization Omega 77 Alpha. Authorization confirmed. Proceed. Target Vec 1 and target Thalan 1. Timeline immediate. Method natural causes. Assets are ready for deployment. Estimated time to completion, 60 hours. Kiwu ended the call and poured himself a glass of wine. Earth wine made from grapes grown in peaceful vineyards where no one spoke of war or honor or the necessity of violence. He sat in his favorite chair and looked out at the stars, thinking about General Dalho's words. Pathetic pacifists, weak, lacking courage. If only the general knew how wrong he was. On Vec Prime, Yoonji Choi received her orders at 347 local time. The message came through her academic research terminal, hidden in what appeared to be a routine update to the university's anthropology database. To anyone monitoring her communications, it would look like nothing more than new information about Vec burial customs. But embedded in the data was a simple code that she had memorized years ago. Execute immediately. Yoonji had been expecting this message for days. The intelligence reports from Harmony's Edge made it clear that diplomacy was failing. She had already prepared everything she would need. She spent the next hour reviewing her plans one final time. Access route, through the military archives where she was a regular visitor. Entry point, the service tunnel that connected the archives to the command building. Security bypass, the maintenance codes she had copied from a janitor's tablet. Exit. Strategy, the same route, but with a 15-minute delay to establish alibi. Method, a synthetic compound that mimicked the effects of acute cardiac failure. Undetectable by standard medical scans. Symptoms consistent with the stress-related heart problems common in aging Vec warriors. Death would appear to be natural, unfortunate, but not suspicious. At 0530, Yoonji left her hotel and took a taxi to the military district. She was dressed in her usual academic clothes and carried her usual research materials. To anyone watching, she was simply an early rising scholar eager to continue her studies. She entered the archives building using the pass card she had been issued weeks earlier. The night guard waved her through without interest. Dr. Choi worked strange hours, but that was normal for academics. The archives were empty except for a single maintenance worker who was replacing light fixtures in the main reading room. Hyunji nodded politely and made her way to the restricted section where the most sensitive historical documents were kept. The service tunnel entrance was behind a false wall panel that looked like part of the original construction. Hyunji had discovered it during her second week on the planet, while researching the building's architectural history. The Vec were proud of their military installations, but they weren't particularly creative about hiding their security vulnerabilities. The tunnel was narrow and poorly lit, designed for utility access rather than regular travel. Hyunji moved, quickly but quietly, following the route she had memorized from stolen building plans. Left at the first junction, straight for 50 meters, right at the ventilation shaft. Up the maintenance ladder to level 3. The tunnel emerged in a supply closet 2 floors below General Dalho's private quarters. Hyunji checked her watch. 0557. Perfect timing. She climbed the service stairs to the general's floor, moving like a shadow through corridors she had studied for weeks. The general's aide, Surka, would already be in the kitchen preparing the, morning tea. The general himself would be finishing his exercise routine. Hyunji slipped into the kitchen through the service entrance. Surka was there, just as expected, measuring herbs into the general's favorite ceramic cup. The young Vec female hummed softly as she worked, a traditional warrior song about victory and honor. Surka? Hyunji spoke softly, not wanting to startle her friend. The aide turned, surprised but pleased. Dr. Choi, what are you doing here so early? I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd start my research early. I was hoping to interview the general today if he has time. He's very busy with the war preparations, but I can ask. Surka smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Would you like some tea while you wait? That would be wonderful. Surka turned back to her preparation, adding hot water to the herbs. While her back was turned, Hyunji reached into her research bag and removed a small vial containing a clear, odorless liquid. She had synthesized it herself using chemicals purchased from perfectly legitimate medical supply companies. 1 drop was enough to simulate a heart attack. 2 drops ensured death. 3 drops left no. Admiral Bo-ram Jung stood in the command center of the Vec flagship Iron Thunder, staring at the holographic display that showed both Vec and Thalan fleet positions. The ship hummed with activity around her as officers prepared for what many believed would be the war to end all wars. But Bo-ram was not thinking about war. She was thinking about coincidences. General Dalho Shin had been her mentor for 15 years. She had seen him survive battles that would have killed younger, stronger warriors. She had watched him endure injuries that should have been fatal. The idea that he would simply die of heart failure, on the very day he was preparing for military action against the Thalans, seemed impossible. Yet the medical reports were clear. Natural causes. No signs of foul play. The stress of command and decades of combat had finally taken their toll on an aging warrior. Bo-ram might have accepted that explanation if it weren't for the news from Thalan Prime. Commander Taemin Song, the Thalan military leader who had been pushing hardest for war against the Vec Empire, had died the same night as General Dalho, also of natural causes, also with no signs of foul play, also at the exact moment when his death would cause maximum disruption to military planning. 1. Death was unfortunate. 2 deaths of opposing military leaders within 18 hours of each other was something else entirely. Admiral? The voice belonged to Captain Sung-Ho Park, her intelligence officer. I have the analysis you requested. Bo-ram turned from the display. What did you find? Captain Park activated his data pad, and new information appeared on the holographic display. Names, dates, locations, a pattern that made Bo-ram's blood run cold. I cross-referenced every major galactic conflict where humans served as mediators over the past 2 centuries. In every case, key military leaders who opposed peace settlements died of natural causes within 6 months of the negotiations. The display showed hundreds of names. Generals, admirals, war chiefs, battle commanders, all dead, all apparently from natural causes, all at exactly the right time to ensure that peace negotiations would succeed. The statistical probability of this being coincidence, Captain Park continued, is approximately 1 in 47 billion. Bo-ram stared at the data for a long moment. Are you suggesting that humans have been assassinating military leaders for 200 years? I'm suggesting that the evidence points to systematic elimination of individuals who posed threats to galactic stability. The methods appear to be sophisticated enough to avoid detection by conventional investigation. But humans are pacifists, everyone knows that. They've never fought a real war. Captain Park highlighted another section of data. According to official records, humans have never fought a declared war against any alien species. But that doesn't mean they've never fought. The new information showed a different pattern: human settlements that had been attacked by raiders, with the attackers mysteriously dying shortly afterward. Human trade ships that had been hijacked, followed by the complete disappearance of the pirate organizations responsible. Human colonies that had been threatened by aggressive neighbors, who subsequently suffered devastating outbreaks of previously unknown diseases. The humans don't fight wars, Captain Park said quietly. They eliminate threats. Quietly, efficiently, and with complete deniability. Boram felt something she had rarely experienced in 30 years of military service. Genuine fear. How many people know about this analysis? Just you and me, Admiral. And I recommend we keep it that way. Why? Captain Park gestured toward the data display. Because if this is true, then we're not dealing with peaceful mediators. We're dealing with the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they've been watching us, studying us, preparing to eliminate us for decades. Boram looked at the tactical display showing the positions of both fleets. Hundreds of ships, thousands of warriors, the most powerful military forces in their respective sectors preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of entire star systems. And somewhere in the space between them, human ships were watching. Ships that looked like merchants and diplomats and peaceful traders. Ships that carried weapons no one suspected and crews trained for missions no one imagined. Admiral? Captain Park spoke carefully. What are your orders? Boram thought about General Dalho's plan to attack the Thalan positions at dawn. She thought about the human diplomat, Kai Wu Park, and his calm smile when the general had insulted him publicly. She thought about patterns and probabilities and the terrible mathematics of survival. Send a message to the Thalan fleet. Tell them we want to resume peace negotiations immediately. Admiral, do it now, Captain, before it's too late. But it was already too late for Admiral Boram Jung. The cup of stimulant tea she had consumed an hour earlier had been prepared by her personal aide, Corporal Jin A. Moon. The same aide who had served General Dalho for 2 years before being transferred to Boram's staff. The same aide who had been recommended for the transfer by the human cultural attaché, who was studying Vec military traditions. The poison that killed Admiral Boram was different from the one that had killed General Dalho. More subtle, designed to act slowly over several hours. By the time symptoms appeared, it would be too late for medical intervention. Boram collapsed at her command station 43 minutes after giving the order to resume negotiations. Her final words, recorded by the ship's communication system, were, tell them the humans. She died before she could finish the sentence. On the other side of the galaxy, Intelligence Chief Mi Young Kwan of the Zenthari hegemony was reaching the same conclusions as the late Captain Park. But Mi Young had advantages that the VEC officer lacked: better computers, more comprehensive databases, and a suspicious nature that had kept her alive through 3 decades of intelligence work. She also had something that Captain Park didn't have: access to the Zenthari's most classified files, including surveillance records that other species didn't know existed. The Zenthari had been watching humanity for over a century, ever since first contact had revealed humans to be surprisingly effective at resolving conflicts that had seemed impossible to solve. The official policy was to welcome human mediation and cooperation. The unofficial policy was to monitor human activities very carefully, because any species that good at making peace was probably very good at making war. Mi Young's investigation had started with a simple question: why did human merchants always seem to be present in star systems just before major political or military leaders died of natural causes? The answer she was discovering was more terrifying than she had imagined. Computer. Display correlation analysis for human civilian presence and unexplained deaths of political figures. The holographic display filled with data points stretching back centuries. Red dots marked unexplained deaths. Blue dots marked the presence of human civilians in the same star systems. The correlation was so strong it looked like someone had drawn a pattern by hand. Computer, focus on the past 50 years. Include all categories of human civilians: traders, diplomats, researchers, tourists, missionaries. The pattern became even clearer. Wherever humans went, inconvenient people died. Not immediately. The delays were carefully calculated to avoid suspicion. But consistently, predictably, efficiently. Mi Young pulled up specific cases. A Corvan arms dealer who had been destabilizing 3 different sectors died of food poisoning 2 weeks after a human anthropologist visited his homeworld to study Corvan eating customs. A Drakmari warlord who had been threatening human colonies died in a hunting accident 1 month after hiring a human guide for an expedition to his private preserve. The more she looked, the more obvious it became. Humanity wasn't just good at making peace. They were exceptionally skilled at eliminating anyone who threatened that peace. Computer, estimate the total number of targeted eliminations over the past 2 centuries. The analysis took several minutes. When it finished, the number that appeared on the display made Mi Young's hands shake. 47,832 confirmed cases. Probable additional cases, 12,456, 60,000 people. 60,000 political leaders, military commanders, arms dealers, warlords, and extremists, all dead, all killed by a species that claimed to be pacifist. Mi Young realized she was looking at the most successful genocide in galactic history. Not genocide of a species or a planet, but genocide of an idea. Humanity had systematically eliminated the concept of large-scale war by killing anyone who tried to start one. She was about to run a deeper analysis when her office door chimed. Come in. The visitor was Dr. Dong Hyun Bae, a human researcher from the Zenthari Institute for Strategic Studies. Mi Young had known him for 3 years. He was a quiet, scholarly man who wrote papers about historical conflict resolution and taught classes on diplomatic theory. Mi Young, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to discuss my research into human peacekeeping methods. Mi Young felt her heart skip a beat. Your research? Yes. I've been analyzing the statistical patterns of conflict resolution over the past several centuries. I think you might find my conclusions interesting. Dr. Bae sat down across from her desk, placing a datapad on the surface between them. His movements were calm and precise, like someone who had done this many times before. I know what you've discovered, he said quietly. The question is, what do you plan to do with that information? The news spread across the galaxy like a virus, jumping from planet to planet through the quantum communication networks that connected civilized space. By the time the sun set on Earth, every major government, military organization, and intelligence service in known space had received the same impossible data. Humanity was not what they appeared to be. The revelation came from Dr. Dong Hyun Bae himself, speaking at an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The chamber was packed with representatives from 47 different species, all of them demanding answers to questions they were afraid to hear answered. The evidence is undeniable, Dr. Bae said, his calm academic voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. For 3 centuries, humanity has maintained galactic peace through the systematic elimination of individuals who posed threats to stability. The Corvan delegate, a massive being whose species had been among humanity's earliest peacekeeping successes, rose from his seat. You're admitting to genocide. No, Dr. Bae replied. We're admitting to surgery. The precise removal of malignant elements before they could metastasize into full-scale wars. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates shouted accusations and demands in dozens of different languages. The Thalan representative accused humans of murdering Commander Taemin's Song. The Vec delegate screamed that General Dal Ho Shin had been assassinated by human agents. Through it all, Dr. Bae stood calmly at the central podium, waiting for the storm to pass. Finally, the chamber fell silent. Every eye was focused on the human who had just admitted to the largest conspiracy in galactic history. You had no right, said Counselor Venka of the Drakmari Republic. No right to decide who lived and who died. You're absolutely correct, Dr. Bay agreed. We had no right. We did it anyway. Why? Dr. Bay activated the chamber's holographic display system. Numbers filled the air above the delegates' heads. Casualty figures from wars past and wars prevented. Economic costs of conflicts that never happened. Population statistics for worlds that might have been destroyed. Because it worked, he said simply. Before human intervention, this galaxy experienced an average of 12 major wars per century, with total casualties exceeding 50 billion beings. In the past 3 centuries, we've had 7 minor conflicts with total casualties under 1 million. The Zenthari delegate, Intelligence Chief Mi-Young Kwan, rose from her seat. The other delegates turned to look at her, surprised. The Zenthari were known for their analytical approach to politics, their preference for data over emotion. The Zenthari hegemony has independently verified these statistics, Mi-Young said. The mathematical conclusion is inescapable. Humanity's intervention has prevented the deaths of approximately 47 billion beings. A new voice cut through the chamber. At the cost of our freedom. The speaker was General Rakhtar of the Korvani Empire, one of the few military leaders who had survived humanity's attention by being smart enough to support peace treaties rather than oppose them. You made us into puppets, the general continued, dancing to your will because we were afraid of dying mysteriously if we didn't. Dr. Bay nodded. Yes, we did, and it kept you alive. It kept your species alive. It kept this entire galaxy from tearing itself apart in endless cycles of revenge and war. But you lied to us, said the Solonian representative. For 300 years, you pretended to be peaceful mediators while secretly operating assassination networks. We preferred to work peacefully, Dr. Bay corrected. When beings like you chose cooperation over conflict, no one died. It was only when military leaders chose war over peace that our other methods became necessary. The Thalan delegate, an elderly female named Juwan, whose forearms trembled with rage, stood slowly. Commander Taiman Song was a good being. He served his people with honor. Commander Song was planning to launch a preemptive strike against Vex civilian targets. Dr. Bay replied without emotion. Our intelligence indicated that his attack would have killed approximately 2 million non-combatants and triggered a sector-wide war that could have lasted decades. You had no proof of that. Dr. Bay touched his datapad, and new information appeared on the holographic display. Military plans, communication intercepts, logistics reports, all clearly showing Thalan preparations for a massive assault on Vec colonies. Commander Song's own files, Dr. Bay said. Downloaded from his personal computer 47 hours before his death. The chamber fell silent again. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, damning. The Thalan delegate sat down heavily, her arguments crumbling in the face of her own government's documented war crimes. What happens now? Asked the Corvan delegate. Dr. Bay looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species humanity had protected, manipulated, and controlled for 3 centuries. That depends on you, he said. You can try to stop us. You can return to the old ways of settling disputes through warfare. You can reject human mediation and solve your own problems through violence. And if we do? Dr. Bay's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Then you do. That's your choice to make. You'll kill us, said General Rakhtar. We'll protect innocent lives, Dr. Bay corrected. If you choose to threaten those lives through military action, then yes, you'll be eliminated. Quickly, quietly, and efficiently. That's tyranny. Yes, it is. But it's effective tyranny. And it's better than the alternative. The Zenthari delegate, Mi-Young Kwan, activated her own datapad. I have a proposal. New information appeared on the chamber's display. Organizational charts, communication protocols, oversight procedures. The Zenthari hegemony proposes the creation of a formal peacekeeping organization, Mi-Young said. Joint human-alien command structure, transparent decision-making processes, clear rules of engagement. Dr. Bay looked at her with something that might have been surprise. You want to formalize our operations? I want to bring them into the light. If we're going to have galactic tyranny, let's at least make it accountable tyranny. The proposal triggered another round of debate. Some delegates supported the idea of formalizing humanity's role as galactic peacekeepers. Others argued that legitimizing assassination would set a dangerous precedent. But as the hours passed, a strange consensus began to emerge. No one wanted to return to the constant warfare that had characterized the pre-human era. No one wanted to risk the billions of deaths that would result from uncontrolled conflicts. And no one was quite brave enough to risk what might happen if they tried to stop humanity's operations entirely. The final vote was close. 24 in favor, 23 opposed. The narrow margin reflected the galaxy's deep ambivalence about the choice they were making. By a single vote, the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority was established. Humanity would continue their work, but under formal oversight and with clear legal authority. Other species would be invited to participate, to help make the difficult decisions about who lived and who died in the name of galactic stability. 3 days later, Admiral Jung Ki-nam received new orders at his command post aboard the Silent Promise. The ship was no longer disguised as a passenger liner. It now flew under its true colors, the black and silver flag of the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a distress call from the Rigel sector. Corvan separatists have seized 3 colony worlds and are threatening to execute civilian hostages." Admiral Nam studied the tactical display. 12 Corvan warships, approximately 3 million hostages. A volatile situation that could spiral into sector-wide conflict if not handled properly. "How long until the diplomatic team arrives?" "Ambassador Park's shuttle is 6 hours out." Admiral Nam nodded. 6 hours for negotiation. 6 hours to try the peaceful approach. 6 hours to give the separatist leaders a chance to choose cooperation over violence. After that, if negotiations failed, the Peacekeeping Authority would demonstrate why humanity had become the galaxy's ultimate arbiters of life and death. "Signal the fleet," Admiral Nam ordered. "Prepare for humanitarian intervention." In the depths of space, 47 ships that looked like merchant vessels began shedding their disguises. Weapon systems came online. Assault shuttles prepared for launch. Special forces teams checked their equipment one final time. The galaxy had chosen to accept humanity's version of peace. But peace, as humans understood it, was not the absence of violence. It was violence held in perfect reserve, ready to be deployed with surgical precision against anyone who threatened the greater good. The Corvan separatists would learn this lesson within the next 24 hours. Their leaders would die quietly, their followers would surrender, and the hostages would be freed. And the galaxy would be reminded once again why humanity's patience was the most dangerous force in known space. President Chan Woo-sung sat in his office in the Terran capital, reading reports from across the galaxy. The revelation of humanity's true nature had triggered protests on 17 worlds, celebration on 23 others, and careful neutrality everywhere else. Some species were calling for immediate war against humanity. Others were quietly inquiring about joining the Peacekeeping Authority. Most were simply waiting to see what happened next. Chan Woo wasn't worried about the protests or the threats. 3 centuries of careful planning had prepared humanity for this moment.